All right, ready? I didn't want to make this video, but I figured out that there was a mistake in the last... I'm not a tutorial guy, but the tutorial that I made where you used Rigify and game rig tools to make a rig that can move using root motion from Blender into Unreal Engine and move around. The problem, though, is we need our character's final hierarchy to not have spine, the hips, as its highest level bone. There's no bone down here. There's nothing. There's just the spine. That's the highest level bone that everything else is parented to. We need a bone that's on the floor. The reason why is this. I don't know why I didn't notice this. Just a stupid mistake because I'm a newbie. So, when we rotate this guy, if I want him to rotate about the axis under him like this, right? So that if you kill him, he falls over like this. Well, if I rotated him about the root bone, in order for his hitbox and everything to come with him and rotate with him, just like this, in order for him to do that, this does not work. Because when we rotate, Unreal doesn't say, oh yeah, there's this nice x-axis that your character's on, and in Blender you rotated him about the x-axis. No, no, no. Unreal says, well, what's the highest level bone? Spine. Okay, rotate about the spine. So instead of rotating like this, it rotates like this, and that is not what we want. This is not what we want. That is not a good death animation. That does not work. We want him to rotate from here, the floor. Solution. So, to start, this is how we're going to start. We have a character. I have animations here, that's why it looks like this, but I have a character. This is the meta rig that we use to generate the Rigify rig, this. And then we have game rig tools installed, so we generated a game rig from it, and it has to be named armature for reasons. It's for Unreal to not generate an extra bone that doesn't move. We don't want that, so name it armature. This is the start, and our highest level bone is deformation spine. And if we go into the control rig, we see that we have the root bone, which is this guy. But the next highest bone is deformation spine. We want there to be an intermediate bone to talk to the root bone of this. So, the solution. This is what it will look like in the end. We will have animations that rotate. In the other one, so here's the start. It looks good. This looks fine. The problem, though, is that Unreal will rotate not about the x-axis. It will apply this rotation to the highest level bone. So, we need a new bone. This guy. This guy right here. So if we go to the armature and we edit, I've added this new bone, and he's called root. Okay? And he needs to get information from the control rig so that when you move the control rig, he actually moves the whole character. Well, how you do that is you go into the root of the control rig and you add another bone, and I call him main root. He is this intermediate bone between the spine and the root. So, we have to basically make a new bone, and then we have to go back to the armature and make another bone. And to make this bone talk to that main root bone that we just made and get its information, so that when the control rig moves and this this main root bone moves around, this little guy right here, then this guy moves. So this guy is in the control rig, this guy is in the armature, the game rig. We need the game rig to get his information. So I'll show you how to do that. So to start, we have a rig that was created, I basically found a free mesh online. I rigged it using Rigify, and then got game rig tools. Come on. It's one of those painful sneezes that doesn't come out. I rigged it with Rigify, and then I made a game rig out of it using CG Dive's game rig tools. And he's rigged. The solution is we need to add 2 bones so that root rotation works. Because right now root motion works, sure. If I move about this hip bone, if I get translated in the world by a hip bone, cool. The root motion works, but the rotation does not work. It should be like this, with a bone on the floor to be our x-axis. But instead, it's this guy, spine, so we don't want that. So, to get to the solution, one, we go to our armature. This is after having animations ready and everything. We're all good. I haven't baked any animations yet, so don't bake any just yet if you already have it. But you don't need to do any crazy re-rigging. You will need to get Unreal. You will need to reassign the skeleton and do stuff in Unreal, but because it is a new skeleton. But your animations you can just bake after doing this change. So it shouldn't change anything really. You just have to basically get everything in Unreal again. You don't have to re-rig or make any new animations or anything again, because this will apply to all of them before baking. So before baking. That's why I do everything and then save it in a document with everything unbaked. And then I will save it as a different one and then bake it in that one. That way I have an unbaked and a baked version. So it might not be needed, but I'm a newbie to Blender. So to actually do the solution, get your game rig armature. And we need to create a new bone. So I'm going to hide the control rig because I don't need to see this shit right now. I'm going to make a new bone. And in this case, our armature is ginormous because, well, I guess I can't see it right here, but he's giant because this is scaled up 100 times. So when we make the bone, it's going to be very, very small. So edit. I'm going to select the bone and scale it up by, don't need it to be 100 times. We'll do scale it up by 20 times. And then I'm going to rotate it about the x-axis by 90 degrees. Actually 108, no, hold on, minus 90 degrees. Right? I don't remember if that's the, hold on, 90? Wait. Rotate about the x-axis by 90. No, I think it is minus 90. Okay. And then I'm going to shift S to bring him to the cursor. And there we go. That's the bone. I'm going to do F2 and name him root. Cool. That's the root. But now he's going to need, we're going to go into pose mode and we're going to give him a bone constraint. We're going to get copy transforms so that whenever the transforms, the scale, the location, the rotation of another bone change, this guy gets updated. And that's how all the other bones here work. They go to the control rig, they find a bone in the control rig, and they say, oh, when the elbow or when the forearm in the control rig moves, I have to move. So the only way that I can move is when that control rig moves, it brings me along with it. But if we make this bone and leave it as is, there's no bone in the control rig for this guy to pull the information from, so he can't move. So now we've edited this. Now we need to go to the rig, the control rig rather. So we will object mode, select it, edit, and we're going to make a new bone down here as well. I'm going to do, again, Shift A, select him, scale him up by like 20, so I can see him pretty well. Rotate about the Y by minus 90. No, not X, minus 90. Shift S, selection to cursor to move him to the middle. Cool. So this guy is going to be named main root. Doesn't matter, you can name it whatever. But we need to parent him to the root so that when the whole root moves, he moves. He's like our placeholder root. So we're in edit mode. So I selected him and then I selected the root. I'm going to control P. So now he's parented to the root. But now you can see that he's parented to the root, but the spine is, or the hips aren't yet parented to him. So we need to go into the armature settings and show the deformation bones, because the deform bones are what actually move our. The deform bones are the bones in the control rig that our game rig bones copy the information from to move. So we need to take this deformation bone of the spine, our highest level bone before this guy, parent him to, okay, I need to actually just hide this guy by clicking him and pressing H. We got our deform spine bone, and we want to parent him to this main root bone. Control P, keep offset. Now the hierarchy is good. So it's root, then main root, and then deformation spine. So main root needs to, I think, because if we go to this deformation spine or any of these other bones, I think there are bone constraints here. See? Yeah, so if we look at these deformation bones here, I'm selecting deformation spine. I just happened to accidentally click it. It is talking to these other bones, and it's copying stuff. So the bones within the control rig talk to other bones within the control rig. It's crazy. I don't know how it all works. So we go back to edit mode in the control rig, and we need to actually go to pose mode and select this bone, give him This is main rig, or a main root, and we need to give him a bone constraint, and he's going to copy the transforms of the control rig's root bone. So when this root moves this guy moves everything, including this guy. And whenever I rotate the root, this guy will root, but this guy will rotate because if this guy's rotated and this guy pulls information from him, then he rotates too. So that should fix the issue. Now we have to go back into our game rig in order to get the new bone that we made here talking to the other. So now we're going to do, I think actually, deformation spine needs to be parented to this guy. I think that's the case. I'm pretty sure I need to take deformation spine and parent him to you. That way, the highest level bone is the root bone, not the deformation spine bone. And then we'll go into pose mode, and he needs to get his constraint. We already set it up earlier. We just didn't have a bone to give it yet. So now we'll say control rig. You're going to go to main root. Cool. And then I'm going to save it. And then that should be good to go. So if I go to my idle animation, let's just do idle stand. Why is it? Okay, I don't know why it's not on that one. Hold on. Let's do rig. Okay, now we're working. All right, so we're in the idle stand animation. I'm gonna just make a new animation really quick to show you that this works. You probably won't have an animation set up right now, or if you do, just go to one and then you can test or go and make a new animation. So I'm gonna do unbaked, test root rotation, save it. Don't need these extra keyframes. I want to now show you that we'll start here, and we will end up in two different outcomes. One, I want to rotate this guy, and that motion will get copied to the root bone by getting copied to the control rig's main root bone, which will then be copied to the armature game rig's root bone. So we want him to rotate 90 degrees to show that that works now, and he doesn't rotate like this, he rotates like this, you see? And then I want to, actually I'm just gonna keyframe this, and I'm gonna show you that root motion also still works. So we'll move him back. And then I'm actually just going to extend this a little. We'll go to like 50 frames. And then we'll move him in the Z direction. We'll just move him over there. And then we'll rotate him back up, kind of. Cool. Like that. You know? So this is what the animation should look like in Unreal. If it was played without the changes we've done, what would happen is instead of rotating like that, he would rotate in place. So his feet would be up here and his head would be here. He would rotate about his spine, his hip bone, which is the highest level bone, the hips, spine 1. I think it's just spine 0 actually. But now he should actually rotate about this bone here. So he should be good. So I'm going to add that test rotation. I'm going to bake it with just default settings. I like, as a naming convention, B and UB, unbaked and baked. So I will bake it, and we can test by going to baked test root motion. It shows that it's like this, but in Blender it would still look good even if it was fucked up. It's only once it gets into Unreal that we can actually tell if it's working or not. So I'll go to object mode, don't care about the rig. I'm gonna select my whole armature, file, export, FBX. I have presets, so I do selected objects, these 3. Scale is 0.01. We need this guy to be scaled up times 100 from the get-go. So remember, this guy is 100 times bigger. He is 150 meters tall, not 1.5. That way, when I scale him down to 0.01, because to get a Blender scene working into Unreal, anything in Blender into Unreal, you have to do this 0.01 scale, otherwise it won't work. So in order to avoid getting a character that's 100 times smaller in Unreal, I want him to be how big he's supposed to be. I have to scale him up to counteract it. We apply the unit, we apply the transform. I don't think these matter. Deform bones only, interlace strips, whatever, it's fine. So we'll just do proof of root rotation. It's very cold, my hands cannot type well. So we will save it here. And we'll check in a third-party viewer, FBX viewer. That's how it's supposed to look. But we need to make sure that he's rotating like that in the game so that if he dies, or if you're a troll or a cyclops and you get shot in the face and your guy's supposed to go, oh, and bend down so that the players can now melee you for crit damage in the eyes. Well, we want to make sure that the whole capsule that you have rotates properly so that your mesh isn't sticking out of your hitbox, and when people try to swing at it, they're going to be swinging into the air because the capsule didn't rotate. It should be the whole capsule, your hitbox, and you, the mesh, rotate together about the root bone instead of floating in the air like that. It should be like the Michael Jackson lean, and then you can be whacked in Unreal Engine. So, I have this test little proof folder to show that this works. Proof of rotation, everything default, but we want the animations. It's going to look kind of wonky in the beginning. These are going to be maybe funky looking, but when we enable root motion, one, we can see that root motion is working because the root is moving. We can see that there's a red line, so it's something is moving. That's what it knows. We can check our hierarchy and see that root, the one that we made, is on the floor. It starts on the floor, and you can tell because it has this little spherical jaggedy thing. And then deformation spine is parented to it in the hierarchy. And we can see that root is moving, and he's rotating exactly how we want instead of rotating about the middle, which is what would happen if we had this. So it's not this. That's not what we want. We want the Michael Jackson lean. That way, you're a Cyclops and you got shot in the eye. And then the players can whack your ass in the face, right? That's what we want. We don't want it to be, oh, I got shot in the eye. The Cyclops now floats? What the fuck is going on? That's not what we want. So, we don't need this guy. I'm going to delete this extra animation. It's because there are NLA strips and there are actions. And because I chose to export both, I get 2. So I'm going to go to Asset Details and enable root motion, which shows how it's actually going to look in the game now. There are a couple other things we have to do, but that'll work. We'll save it. I'm going to create an montage just called root rotation current. It's bad naming, but whatever. We can check our skeleton to see how we look. The hierarchy looks good. We can see if Unreal's happy with it. Did it generate a good physics asset? It did. It's pretty dang close to the character. Good job, Unreal. Looks good. Looks like it's happy. If it generates like 1 for this and 1 for this and 1 for this and 1 for this, yeah, rewatch the tutorial, bucko. Holy. So we can edit our animation blueprint to now use proof of rotation skeleton. We can go into the character that I've made just as a test to show this. I'm going to save all so this doesn't crash. I'm going to use, again, proof of rotation. And then now we're going to do this montage that is called root rotation current. And I'll show you something here in a sec, but now we get to see. Yes, he rotates like Michael Jackson and moves. Oh, there's actually one more thing we need to do. We want to go to the montage, not the anim, and turn on, if you want the character to stay how he is after, we don't want this auto blend out. So like if someone has a death animation, and the base pose, if you're not moving, is breathing, and you play a death animation, at the end, the character will be on the ground, the root will be rotated, but then he'll be breathing. You might want that, but in the case we don't, we turn this off, and you can see, it will keep the last pose until stopped explicitly. So, now it should stay how it ends up. So now we can play, he leans, he moves, and I have play speed slowed, and he moves and stays. One issue, he's moving. He is slowly sliding. So, and we can see that I just had this playing slowly just to show, but if we actually play it like this, and we can go see, he's still moving. So most of it looks good, but why is he floating? There's a reason. Or why is he moving like that? Okay, so for animations that move the root in the z-axis, up or down, like a dodge animation, where you jump back, if a goblin jumps back you still want to be able to shoot him in the head in the air. You don't want him in the air to have his head still be down here. So if he jumps, you don't want to shoot here. You want to shoot him actually in the head, if that makes sense. So in order to have the root and the capsule and hitbox move with the character for animations that move the root in the Z-axis vertical, you need to set the movement mode to be flying. So before you play this anime montage, you need to get the character's movement, set the movement mode, and then play the animation. But after, what you need to do is you need to go back and set the movement mode to no longer flying, because if the guy's on the ground and he jumps and then he lands on the ground again, once the animation's done, you don't want him to be flying anymore. You want him to go back to walking, let's just say. So ignore this part for now. We'll do that and just see how this works. So he goes and plays it, and then, and once the animation is done, he goes back to the ground. So he'll move. I think that's why. So we might need to add a delay here and wait for it to be completed for that to happen. Let me see if that changes. Yes. There we go. Cool. So now this plays the anime montage, or it sets him to flying so the animation works, plays the animation, waits till it's done, then updates the movement to go back to walking. So he flies, plays the animation, and then goes down and lands. Cool. He's floating a little bit just because this needs to be a little bit lower. So play, go, and boom. So that was this big dodge animation, and now he's cool. And if I wanted him to end up horizontal, I could just end him horizontally in the animation. Cool. So we've shown that it all works. One thing you might want to do, though, is before the animation, you want to store how the character is moving. So you just do character movement, get the movement mode, which is what we're setting here. It's this enum whatever the fuck variable, and set it. So we want to store it. And then we make him fly so that the animation works, and then we make him no longer fly. But what you actually want to do is not make him no longer fly. You want to bring him back to whatever he was doing beforehand. Because I'm picturing Super Smash Bros. If you're falling off the map, and then you want an animation that plays that raises you back up, like an up B or whatever the button is to save yourself and go up, you go up. But after, you don't want to immediately go to walking. You want to go back to what you were before. So you're falling, you save yourself. Oh, it's not quite enough. You're still falling, motherfucker. So you save it, you make him flying so the animation works, you wait till it's done, and then you set him back to what he was. So it turns out that in this case, when you have a character in Unreal and he's in the air like this, and you don't set him to flying beforehand, it thinks that he's falling. So it's going to bring him back to falling after the animation is done. So he falls. So that's that. And if we test, actually, we can print to see what it actually is. See, one sec. We'll print the mode. It is falling. So it will set him back to falling. So we'll set him to flying, and then at the end, set him back to whatever the hell he was doing. If he was walking forward, he's back to walking forward. If he was doing something else, he's back to doing that. Cool. And boom. Look at that. It works. They're good. The rotation's wonky because I think the rotation was wonky at the end of the animation anyways, which I can verify. Hold on. Oh, that's the wrong animation. Okay. Baked test rotation. Oh, that'll do it. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. He's going up, and then the point is he falls, and if we check here, yes, he is indeed wonky. He is not flat to the ground. So that is how you do that. Some other things before I figured out this whole setting afterwards. You could technically avoid this if you go into the character and then you search DEC for deceleration and you look for flying. I guess you could also just check fly. If the deceleration is 0, then after the animation stops, Unreal sees, like let me just show you here instead of telling. Unreal will see that he's flying. So he's still flying. And Unreal will calculate the velocity that he's going when he's moving, because if the root is moving, the character's moving in the game. So Unreal will automatically tell you how fast. Well, because he was moving and now he's flying, he's very, very, very slowly braking. So if I instead go to the character and then type in fly, and I set this braking deceleration to be 100, he's going to brake a bit faster. Like that. And now he's not sliding anymore. So that's one way to to remove the sliding. But in this case, if I want him to fall back down to the floor, I actually want this to be the case. And I'm probably going to leave that deceleration there just in case, like, I don't know, maybe I do an animation and the character flies up in the air and he stays flying for a while. But I don't want him to be moving. Like, I'm picturing an an Elden Ring boss like Melania or something, right? I haven't played the game, I just know what I've seen. And she'll like do this huge whooah, and then fly up into the air and then stay there and then throw bolts at you. Well, I don't want her to fly up in the air and then be awkwardly sliding vertically. So what I would do is I would keep her mode flying for now until I want her to do something else maybe. And this might all be in an AI task. So like, in an AI behavior tree, there might be something like, get player's location, and then there's another task that checks. There's a condition that says, is the player's location is the player's location in range? Is it close enough to attack the player? Oh, yes. So it runs the next task, and the next task might be flying spear throwing move. So it initiates fly spear throwing move, where it figures out, okay, so she was on the ground before she was walking. We'll save that. And then in the task, make her flying. That way we can do the flying spear moves where she goes up and then starts chucking the spears. And then at the end of it, we set her back to what she was doing. So maybe she falls back to the ground. Or maybe she stays flying. We want her to keep flying. And then she goes and does some other stuff. So you might want to, if you want to avoid the sliding, you just do this. Or you could just bring the character back to the movement mode that he or she was at before, and there won't be any sliding. Anyway, even if I took the deceleration and put it back to 0, boom, there's no sliding. There might be a little bit of sliding. I bet you maybe not, I can't tell actually. But that should be the comprehensive solution for this. So sorry, it took a while to get through all this, but basically, you just make a new bone in this guy, you call him root, parent the spine to it, give him a bone constraint, but there's no bone for him to be constrained to just yet. Then you go to the control rig that controls the motherfucker, and then you give it a new bone called main root. You parent the main root. It should be like intermediate root, but it's fine. You parent it to the control rig's root, and then parent the control rig's spine to the main root. That way, when the root moves, the spine moves. Excuse me. You take that main root and you constrain him to the control rig's root. And then you go back to your armature, to this root, the game rig, and then you finish that copy bone transforms, and you say control rig main root. So basically adding 2 bones. We're saying, hey, control rig, hips are now parented to you, and you're now parented to the root. That way you can give the information to the game rig. Cool. And you get information from the root. So copy transform. So it's parent the hips to the main root, parent the main root to the rig, and copy transforms of the rig. Don't just move and say 0, 0 because it's not actually moving relative to the root. It's actually copying that information. That way, the game rig's new root, this guy, can copy his information. Boom. That's how you do it.